We are part two of my interview with Shireen Smith. Shireen, it's lovely speaking to you. We've been talking a little bit about law, your background, and then we started off talking about copyright, which I guess is one of the rights that many people may have heard of. You know, if something's written, that, like your book will have copyright on it, pieces of music, and people see copyright on. Can you just tell us technically a little bit about when copyright does emerge?
Well, copyright resides with the creator of a piece of work, unless it's by your employee, in which case you as the employer will own the copyright. So a huge problem with copyright is that people assume because it's their idea, they will own the copyright on something.
And you touched on this just a moment ago. You were saying that, for example, if, let's say, I commission a software developer to develop a piece of software, I might think that the copyright is mine because I've asked them to create this particular thing as part of my stable of what I'm doing. But actually, you're saying that technically the copyright will be with the developer.
That's right. They will own the copyright.
Automatically?
Automatically.
And
so you need to have that discussion as to who's going to own the copyright before you commission them to do the work.
And so that in itself is gold dust for somebody to be mindful about. Some of the other ones, then there are other ones like that. Tell us a little bit of this. I guess the trademarks and design right. You were telling us a little bit. You've got your wonderful bag here, which I think you should show the world. So we're talking about this design right. Well, can you tell us a little bit about then the design right? What's that? Because that's one I hadn't heard of as much until recently.
The design protects the whole shape and the visual appearance of something like a handbag. Right. It can also protect a logo. Actually, you can register.
So it could be any. Does it have to be? So it doesn't have to be a physical. Or is it usually a physical?
Basically, any 2- or 3-dimensional item can be protected with design right.
And then we've got the one that lots of people will have heard of, which is the trademark. Tell us a little bit about the trademark. And I was looking to find the trademark of your company on here, and then you told me that actually the name of the book you had trademarked. Right. So can you tell us a little bit about the trademark? And again, we've got that R. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, with a trademark, you can't trademark a word that describes the thing it is or the business you run. So I couldn't have trademarked the law of brands because that is just purely descriptive. But legally branded is distinctive because it suggests what it's about without directly
describing. It's kind of that phrase, it's that kind of catchphrase that relates to that. And so there are all sorts of can you give us a couple of examples of famous trademarks, just so people might think in their mind? So the McDonald's M.
That's right.
Example, that's a logo mark.
Nike.
Okay.
Google.
Yeah.
Google actually started off calling their business Backrub.
Right. And
then they changed the name. A lot of businesses actually do end up, once they know that they've got something viable, they will rebrand and get a good name for the business. And
then there's another one, the one that lots of people who were here in the British Library, might be lots of people who invent stuff. Then there's the patent, and as I understand it, that relates to an invention, a physical product or what have you. Tell us a little bit about the patent.
Well, a patent, an Any Wake Up cup is an example of a patent.
So that was a special one, the baby cup.
It was a baby cup that didn't drip if it fell sort of sideways. So appreciating that this is a problem and then finding a solution for it is often what precedes an invention. Right. Now, if you can get an invention over something that's wanted by the market, it gives you a monopoly, so it stops competitors just free riding or copying your ideas.
Got you. And there's been a couple of famous cases recently, isn't there? For example, that whole phone world and IT world, there's some of these things that come up. It looks like when people have got something there. And I guess I'd imagine that there you might get where a number of these different rights might be up. Might be the design rights, and perhaps also other patents as to whether people are.
Yeah.
So this is obviously a big area, an important area, and I guess one of the things that struck me when I was so keen to speak to you, Shireen, was that you're passionate about this topic and you're mindful that perhaps it's more that lawyers could be doing, but also everybody who's in and around this could be doing. I would imagine that for somebody who's a small business owner, this area can be overwhelming. They don't know where to start, or they're afraid of going to lawyer. Tell me, what's your message to somebody who's starting up a business? Where should they start, and when should they be alerted that they should think about speaking to somebody about some of these rights?
Well, I would say the very first thing you need to do is to talk to an IP lawyer, because a lot of these rights...
An intellectual property lawyer,
yeah. Because these rights have to be secured early on. And I've written this book really to give information, but to know how that applies to you and your business proposition does involve getting advice.
And what would your tip be? Because lots of people are afraid of going to a lawyer because they're worried about the cost, or they're worried about being silly, or whether it's too soon, or what have you, or they're just intimidated. Would your advice just be to, I mean, with many professionals, you might just have an initial meeting so that you can find out, you can find out if you want to work with them. What would your advice be there?
Well, I think most law firms will offer half an hour's free consultation, and that can be a really good opportunity to decide whether or not you can work with someone. Yeah. You know, it's not so much to pick up free advice, because you know, you're not going to get a lot of value necessarily from that, but to see who you want to work with.
And presumably that's extremely, and whether they seem to, presumably whether they get what you're doing, whether they're interested, or whether they're passionate about business.
That's
presumably one of the reasons why you set up your particular business. One of the things that you talk about is that, and I thought it was fascinating in the book, and I'm really looking forward to reading the rest of it. I've just begun reading it. Is that you said that actually it's quite your point to the fact that there's a lot more that lawyers could be doing, and people in and around like branding. You know, you're saying if you're going to a branding agency or a design agency, for them perhaps even just to be able to flag up some of those issues about, like, for example, if they've designed it, that might really help. And that really struck me as being true. What would you like? What do you think that the legal profession needs to do more, and what do you think that others could be doing more to kind of help people to negotiate or to educate people in this whole field?
A lot of awareness raising needs to happen, because even if you understand the basics, that's not enough quite often. There are some real complexities to understand, and within the entrepreneur community, the view is that if you can't patent something, it's, you know, the other IP rights don't really matter. I mean, I was at a tech talk last night, and these are quite well, you know, established entrepreneurs. They said, no, brand doesn't really matter. It's not going to be a Coca-Cola. So, you know, a brand is only goodwill. And you can't be more wrong than that, because if you've got a business, say, like Zumba, you know, it's a dance. If you haven't got a good name for it, which you've trademarked, you lose all the licensing opportunities.
I see. And that's a good example. So therefore that name, so it might be a fresh, exciting name, and then from that, because it kind of takes off the value of that as a brand, there's all sorts of things you could protect, and as you say, license, allowing other people to use that. I see.
That's right. Quite often when a business succeeds, it can go into other areas, extend the brand. And if you haven't got a name that's trademarked that you can stop other people using, then you actually have a less successful business as a result.
I see. So you were saying that there's a lot of education that needs to be done. And where would you like to see that education begin? Because you know, I know you're quite a mild-mannered, but I know you're quite a feisty lady. And sometimes I've heard you talk to some people. You want to see this brought more into when people are studying business at schools? Would you like to see lawyers understand these areas more practically? What would be on your shopping list?
Well, I think it shouldn't be regarded as an esoteric subject within the legal profession. I think every lawyer should know the basics of IP. And also designers don't get training in it. So web designers, people assume that their web designer or their advisor will know all the IP, but they don't. So they need this book as much as
anybody else.
Any other business owner.
And tell me, are there particular types of these rights where you would say to entrepreneurs whereby that they really do need to be alerted early on? You said there, well, one thing is that it's worth having that conversation very, very early on anyway. I would imagine that other ones which require different types of care, I would imagine that if I'm, maybe it's because of my background in terms of writing and so on, copyright can often be something that somebody might be able to have a good grasp of quite quickly themselves. However, some of the others, they're very unlikely to. Well, the one that I think is really interesting here, that from my little knowledge, is this one that you touched on, which is the one about patents, isn't it? Where, as you say, on the one hand, people are very drawn to it, they want the patents and so on, but it also can be very, very costly, and it can be very, very involved. If you've got a particular advice for somebody who's going down that trail, because some people might because I guess there's also educational point of the entrepreneur. I've seen lots of people who haven't done enough research, and they need to do their research before they're spending huge sums of money with a lawyer, but equally they need to have an intelligent conversation with the lawyer early on. Can you tell us a little bit about if somebody's finding themselves that they're wanting to go down that particular road, what would be your tips that they're able to ensure they're protected and engage adequately with a lawyer?
Yeah. Well, I would say don't get too attached to your idea, because people can get so enthused by what they're doing and spend thousands and thousands on patenting. I mean, you see it in Dragon's Den, and then the dragons say, well, this isn't a big problem. So I think it's really important to go out there and be receptive to whether or not your invention is needed by the market.
And that's a lovely point to say, isn't it? Because again, it brings up the thing that lots of people out there are absolutely petrified to talk to people. But what you're saying is that actually, but you do need to go and find out, is there actually a need, so that you're actually clear that there is actually a need, and what you're designing is actually serving what there is a need for. And then what? Right. So if somebody's done that, so that there seems to be that need. Any other then general advice for when then somebody's going down this particular road, which they may know very little about? You've talked a little bit about having that intelligent conversation with the lawyers, finding out if you can work with them, which I'd imagine is extremely important. Yeah. Any things that then you would say to them, because I'm mindful that some of these things can be a long process. Any other tips?
Well, to try to be marketing the thing it is that you haven't, you want to patent. Usually you file an application, you've got 12 months before you have to spend any more money. So really use that 12 months to see what demand there is for it before you incur greater costs.
Because unless there's actually a demand, sure it might, presumably what you're saying is that it might well be, sure you might even end up with a patent which might have cost you a lot of money, but if there's no demand...
That's right.
But where if there is demand, that can... Yeah. And anything before we close? And it's been really enjoyable, and I definitely would recommend this book. And actually, maybe on that point, who have you written this for? Is it for lawyers? Is it for people who are business owners like me? People who advise business owners like me? Who's this? Who do you want to get this book seen by?
Well, business owners is the target, but of course, you're also a business owner as well as an advisor, and so are many other people who could benefit from the book, like lawyers. So, I really thought that for such an important area, there's a real need for information that's accessible. So,
no, that's wonderful.
This book.
That's wonderful, and I must say it's very, very readable, and I'm certainly going to read this. It's going to certainly help me in terms of when I'm advising people and when to signpost. And I think that my own view on this, Shireen, is that, I guess any of us who are in business, it's about how can we perhaps better signpost people to the kind of support that we need. And I think that sometimes there can be a nervousness about signposting people, but I think the more we can signpost people to all sorts of different people who can help them, the better it is all round for everybody, and it means that people can then become informed and engaged. And tell me, just before we close, what is it that because you started off by saying a little bit about your story and so on. What does the future hold for you? What are you passionate about now? What keeps you excited about working in this particular field?
Well, I've got lots of projects on the go. I've got a naming company we're setting up because names are so...
Well, helping people to come up with the kind of names that are going to really help add value to their brand.
That's right. Right. And also a website which I have an idea for. I'm really excited.
Yeah. And I can tell it's a good intro, which is why you're not telling me much about. But yeah, so there's an entrepreneur in you, clearly that entrepreneur in you that's really excited about that stuff. Well, I just want to thank you very, very, very much. If people are trying to track you down, as right solicitors, where will people find you? So a web address that you can quickly share.
It's www.ip-brands.com.
Oh, fantastic. Excellent. Well, wonderful. It's been a real pleasure chatting to you.
Thank you very much, Rishi, for inviting me along.
Oh, a real pleasure, and I hope that people find it very, very useful, and lots of people kind of track you down or attend events and talks that you're running. Thank you so much. I'm going to leave you to smile at the camera. I'm just going to turn the camera and actually why not should give you your book back to hold and enjoy. Thank you.